get this going. Hello, viewers and listeners. In this episode, I really love this one. We're going to talk baseball because that is my passion. That's what has driven my athletic career and my coaching career, my personal training career. It's the reason I do what I do, as I've done. The song that is sung all too often, I always refer to it, is that I got hurt. I had professional ambitions and aspirations, and I got cut short. And that is the story for a lot of us. And whether it's the story for you not making the Little League team, you not making your high school team, college team, or professionals, right? That should not be if there is something that we can do about it. And I know in my career, I figured out a lot of some things that I would have changed to provide a better potential experience for my players. And I am on right now with Kyle Brennan, who is the minor league player development coach, one of them for the Huston Astros right now. We met freshman summer playing summer ball, where college teams send their players to different leagues around the country just so they can get some more reps during the summer to keep the skills sharp. We met in Pennsylvania, and we've been talking ever since. We've been diving down rabbit holes of science, and he has quite an extensive background. He is certified through the National Strength and Conditioning Association with the CSCS. He is a functional range conditioning specialist, which is awesome, and I think I pushed him in that direction. Woo! And he also graduated college doing exercise science as well. So this guy knows what he's talking about. We're going to talk baseball. And we're going to talk about what's going on new with the world of baseball and if it has changed at all. So, Kyle, thank you so much for being on. Let me know what's going on.
It's funny you said that your career was cut short by injury. Mine was not. I just didn't hit well enough. So, tough. You need a podcast about that. Anyway, so, just some background on me. I'm recently hired as a player development coach, which is someone who works, in my case, with catchers, outfielders, and base runners, basically a defensive coach for the Astros organization. Before that, I was training catchers, baseball players. I was working as a strength coach and also as a skill or sport coach, doing lessons, coaching high school level and travel teams, all that. So that was basically what I've been doing post-college. I went to school at University of Buffalo, Division I school for exercise science. I was a catcher there. Pretty good defensively. I was a 2017 Johnny Bench watch list member, which is basically recognized as being pretty good as a defensive catcher. Right. Afterwards, I had planned on going to PT school as a physical therapist and then switched to be a physician assistant, a PA. And then after school had more, prerequisite classes like organic chemistry, biochemistry, things like that. I was working as an EMT for hours and keeping baseball alive on the side, just coaching mainly to help out the travel organization that raised me. And then eventually, long story short, decided that that's not it's not really what I want to do long term. I guess if you ask me what my why or my purpose is, it has something to do with providing information based on my experience and knowledge to help players understand better. Mm-hmm. And I didn't feel like I could get that through the medical route. So I started full-time coaching, started a business that I was working before being hired by the Astros, and that's sort of a roundabout way of explaining what I'm doing. Along that, I met up with Colin, and then he opened my mind to some of the FRC work and realized that, all right, that'd be a good next step. That's something I don't know that could help me. So I signed up for one of the classes and then have been following it and along a bunch of other things since. So sort of a summary.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. I think it's really cool. The roundabout ways we find out where we are. My one client I work with, I always show up this word. It makes me feel smart. She told me it's circuitous is the definition of that. It is a starting point and ending point where the distance between them is, good Lord, it is just everywhere. And but I think what speaks to that is you found something clearly you're passionate about and you get paid to do it. But your why is really important, where it's the same thing. We're trying to push it forward. We're trying to learn from what we did and then actually apply it to something new, something more valuable to those coming up. I think one of the biggest issues in sports in general is the traditional, we've just been doing this, let's just keep doing this because we won. where we don't ask why, we don't look back objectively on what we did and if it was actually hurting people or if it was actually not working or if something else was happening and we weren't just aware of it. And so the ability to acquire knowledge, look back on those things, and then apply it to those coming up for their betterment. That's awesome. That's something I can always get behind. So kudos to you, sir. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, no, an important thing with that is, at least in my case, I've found that you have roughly it is that you like to do or you might want to do, and you have a bunch of things that are interesting and maybe some things that you think might, by knowing them or learning them, might help you in, head towards that ultimate thing. And then that's the stuff you should be learning about.
Exactly.
Which sounds simple, but most people don't do it.
No, I really don't. And I'm going to say it 1,000 times on this podcast and my media and everything, just like to do that stuff, to chase that information. And hopefully people will take that. I've had a lot of good stories already on people kind of making the jump and finding out that they didn't hit the ground. They actually started to fly and they enjoyed the jump. So that's really good. And so we're going to talk about a lot of things that you do, probably new now, and things you learned. And coming from a Division I catcher, Johnny Bench Award, like you were very good. There's no denying you were very good. And you're still going to tell us a little bit about what is new. And I think that speaks volumes to someone that isn't just going to rely on what made them good. They're going to be like, why did I do this? Why did it make me good? But how is that going to apply specifically to someone else, those that I coach? So we could talk, like I said, about the youth, the college pros, everything we can do. So let's start at the top and we'll kind of work down. So what are you most excited about to bring to the table in your human development or player development with the Astros? Also, the Astros, big time FRS organization. I know Functional Range Systems has worked with them extensively already. So,
yeah, right before I was hired, I guess in January they had all of our strength and training, sports, strength conditioning and sports medicine staff got trained, or they went to Houston and did some training. So that was cool. I think that's something they do often. So yeah, it's cool that the other part of the staff is knowing the same language. Honestly, I'm the outsider that knows their language, so that's pretty cool. I think that's at least with the Astros. I know it's all over the place, but with us, a lot of the coordinators and coaches and whatnot, they have some background in either like psychology or like mental skills, or they have some background in the way the body works. And they're starting to bridge that gap a little more. It's a little less of strength coach on one side and sport coach who knows nothing about the body on the other side, with that, is living in, I did it this way and this is how it's been done. It's a lot more collaboration, and a lot more of like, this is objectively working and this is working in other positions or ages or sports, and let's apply it to this and see if we can, progress the issue. And I think my skill set just plays into that, which is why I think I was hired. I could speak the languages and had been showing that already prior to being interviewed and all that. So yeah, just basically understanding the body and having a movement sense and being eager to apply that to progress baseball.
Right. That's awesome. And so who do you work with the most? And then what have you been using from all this newly acquired information that you may feel maybe a little different than what traditional baseball sees?
Yeah. So with the Astros, outfielders and catchers are what I've worked with mostly so far. We didn't get into base running yet. Keep in mind that spring training was cut short due to the whole virus and all of that. So I got to meet a handful of the players. I don't know, probably 30 or 40, but definitely not the rest, the other 100 or so. So a lot of it's been with the just working with the catchers. But what's cool, there's a difference between coaching at least in my short experience, coaching at the professional level versus the younger players, is that the younger players, it's like, I know a lot more than you. I'm going to try to relate to you and help you understand. Whereas these catchers, they're in high A, double A, at least the ones that I've worked with, and like, they know as much, they're in the same realm as I am. So for me to like show up and tell them what to do, that's not the way it goes. It's more of a back and forth, bouncing ideas off each other. I'm basically just an objective lens that's outside of their body to help them. It's more of like providing feedback and like, hey, here's what I think, and bounce it off them. It's not like do this, yes sir, like listen to me. So it's definitely, it's like if I were to coach you, I wouldn't, I wouldn't be like, this is how you catch. Like, I know you already did it. So it's like, try this. So that's a big difference. Outside of the Astros, before I was working with mostly middle school and high school players, kind of in the 13 to 17-year-old range, and then some college guys sprinkled in. So that's what I would do in the off season. A mix of catchers and just baseball and softball players in general. As far as what is progressing the game forward, I think it's just trying to pull back all the layers of how the game has been played for forever. There's certain quote unquote old school things that will stand the test of time in terms of mental resiliency and competitive nature and being a professional. Like those things, you listen to someone who's played in the league for 10 years before you, and it's like their messages are awesome. Now, in terms of how to train for the position and maybe how to move it in certain ways, just trying to take an objective look at it is, I think, where the industry has gone. You've seen an explosion in the last, 5, 6, 7 years, whatever. Kind of a long roundabout answer, but that's kind of what I do. I'm riding that wave and helping that movement. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. No, that makes total sense. I think that's always going to be true. Baseball, the 30-year coaches, everyone's like hard nosed, like you got to be professional, you got to be mentally tough. It's a sport of failure. Like the classic thing is 3 out of 10 times, and you're a very successful human on the offensive side of baseball, which is still really hard, right? So those things will always stand the test of time. But the new things are really important because if something is progressing and we can use that, right, to better the player's health and the player's chance of career, not only is their health improved, we reduce injuries, we mitigate the chance of injuries, right? They play longer. But then on your side, like there's money on the side too. And then on that analogy with the high school kid, like college is on the line, dollar signs on their aspirations. So that's why I think getting into the nitty gritty detailed stuff about how to improve someone's movement, someone's ability to play well, safely and effectively is priceless. So let's talk a little bit about like that. So when it comes to, maybe it's the FRC stuff we'll talk about and your catchers. So what have you been applying with this information about joint training and strength training with this that makes your catchers a little better?
In the scope of the Astros, the strength conditioning staff does a really good job of that. They do extensive evaluation on players. They measure all sorts of things, for example, passive active range of motion gaps, or, their on force plates, like their output or their contractile qualities and things of that nature. As far as the sport coaches, that's not my domain. So I've done some work or some discussion with some of the players. It's more of a collaboration at that level. Separate from that, in the off season when I'm working with the younger players, I think, and you brought it up earlier, where it's you mentioned the point of like, I'm not coaching this because it works for me and that therefore it's right, or this guy is really good and he's my favorite player, so you're going to do it. It used to be like trial and error, like try this, try that, see what works. And there's still, that's great coaching is to let the athlete experiment. But now we can take an objective view, and it's like, if we understand the player in terms of a compilation of like what their joints are able to do. If for example, like their left hip sucks at rotating really well because they built up just nasty, scar tissue and whatnot from an injury, or they've, pitched a long season. Their front hip is all locked up. And now they're going to try to catch, and that left side's really bound up. Then we can play around with some of the different stances, or maybe their, foot position when they land, when they're throwing, to kind of work around those things and allow the athlete to perform and have the whole kinetic sequence move well. That's a whole different approach than let's beat one motion into the ground and then eventually they won't do it. We'll throw our hands up and say, all right, try this instead. Like it's kind of flipped on its head. So that's what I like doing. It's like, let's learn how the athlete moves and their body works first, and then design their swing, their throw, their catcher stance, and whatever the sport is. Let's work that way. It might take longer at first. And if a player comes to me for a lesson and I spend, teaching them how to stretch for half of it, it's not the greatest look from the parent because they want me to tell their son or daughter what's wrong with them. But big picture in terms of their path of development, it'll save time and it'll get rid of a lot of headaches, I found.
Yes, dude, I love that answer. That's awesome. So we're going to tease that out. So analogy for fitness, I always kind of bring it back, is why I assess people that come into me. Day one, you're getting an assessment. I don't care. I have a nice, pretty assessment. We do a ton of work. But if you kind of get turned off by whatever reason on that, I'm looking at you. I need to know what your shoulder is capable of. We talked about passive and active right now. And so basically that is passive range of motion is the potential movement a joint can show you. So if I take Kyle's arm and I lift it over his head, I'm looking at what it might do. And then I will check that against his active and say, hey, Kyle, lift up your arm. And then does it match? Is it really close? Is it really far away? And then we kind of make assessments and stuff based on that. That allows me to make the modifications. So if you can't lift your arm over your head, we're not doing pull-ups on day one. We might do some rows. We might do some rows in an angle close to that. But if you're not showing me the ability to even get in that position, forcing you into that position is not going to go well. The effectiveness isn't going to go well. You're not going to be able to do a pull-up. And then the safety's bad. You might get hurt doing it because you're not in there. So what Kyle's saying is he's doing the same thing with his baseball players. What he's doing is assessing what their ability is. Now he has the idea of like, all right, this position requires this. I assess them. They don't have that. So for now, we're going to strategize around their limitations, but then simultaneously work to maybe get them into positions. That's a hell of a more accurate and effective strategy than going, I don't care, you're a catcher, you're meant to do catcher things. I love that answer. That was awesome. So let's talk about it. Give me some, maybe a few examples or.
No, that's really good. It ultimately comes down to, and this is one of the points that we talked about emailing before this, was it all comes down to what the client, the player, whatever, is signed up for or what they pay for, whatever. So if you're in a group, like we run catcher clinics, and if you're in a group of 60 catchers in an hour, I'm not assessing you. No one is. Yeah. But I can take 12 of them in front of me and say, everyone try this stance. Okay, now try this stance. Now try this stance. And give them all the basic options and be like, remember which one was the worst? Never do that. And whichever one felt the best, do that. And usually it's the same stance that they were doing prior to that little, experiment. But some kids are like, hey, this works good. And I tell them like, then that's good versus, oh, my high school coach says, this isn't the best way. I know we've had conversations about that. But to avoid that rabbit hole, back to the point is if I have someone who's like, I'm training with you for 2 months, twice a week for an hour, I'm going to like, all right, let's take that first hour and figure out exactly what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and also overlay that with what's actually important. For example, if you're a catcher or a baseball player, if you don't have the greatest shoulder extension or basically pushing your arm past your pocket, I'm not convinced that's a pressing issue. If your arm moves overhead, fine. Point is, like, baseball, softball player, rotational athlete needs to do just that, rotate really well. They need to move side to side and transfer that lateral energy into a rotation. If you're not rotating well, then we have problems. If you rotate really well, and, the whole point is that and you do this more than I do because you work with an array of sports, but you take what they're good at, what they're not good at, what they need to be good at, what they don't need to be good at, you combine those, come up with a plan of, and then you rank everything from, someone is, their training age is 0. They haven't lifted much. They're 13 years old. Like, they need to just learn how to move well and gain some strength. And a lot of this will take care of itself versus like, you work with the older population. If that shoulder is preventing them from, opening a cabinet, let's fix that first. They're probably going to help their life more than, their bench press going up 10 pounds.
Damn right.
Is that kind of where you're headed?
That's exactly, man. And yeah, exactly. I'm trying to, and then highlight how I want to stress to anyone watching or listening to this, how good of a coaching service that is. Not just for baseball and catchers, but like how it should be across the board. Because the worst thing coming from a player's perspective, especially on the mental health side of things and the ability to build confidence, is the worst thing is ever for a coach that doesn't understand that to tell you, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, And for the kid to not be able to do this and feel like they are inferior, feel like they're not going to be good enough, when really all the coach had to do was assess them and be like, oh, you literally can't do this. Let me help you work around this. There's something that you can do to be effective while we work on this. Now the person knows, oh, I just have work to do. I have room to improve. Let's do that. Because from personal experience, it's awful, right? You just, all right, I guess I was not as good as what people said. And it just comes from this lack. I don't expect all sport coaches to know this, but I do expect them to understand the value of this and to seek out someone who does understand that and hire them and use them to outsource for that, because it can only help your team win games. And if you're there to win games and build scholarships or win World Series, yeah, that's the reason why you want people confident, moving well, effectively executing, and being safe the whole time, right? Because if people are hurt on your bench, you're not winning games. That's just, it is what it is. You're not going to win games. So I can't stress the value of a sport coach who is combining in this hybrid service the ability to do that for people, especially at the youth level, when you are inspiring people to go further and not having little kids that screw this, I hate the sport because this person always tells me to do something and I hate it, right? So
yeah, no, there's two different points you brought up which were interesting. I guess the first, because it's still kind of on track, is just the value again of the assessment first. And obviously the context is going to determine how in-depth that assessment is. But like, I remember myself, one of the players I was working with, when he would hit, his front leg wouldn't open up very much. And most hitters, they'll open their front foot slightly when they throw because it frees up some rotation in their front hip and allows them to, as a whole, rotate better. I know certainly me, like my front leg did not rotate well. So if I didn't clear some space, body wouldn't work well, whatever. And I'm used to kind of having a natural block, I guess you would say, where, I'd rotate, and all of a sudden my leg wouldn't rotate anymore. And that would be like a firm snapping point, which would allow, be like a whip. My upper part of my body would then start rotating more. Important thing for how swinging and throwing work. But so I was like telling this kid trying to move his front foot because I'm like, all right, let's start at the bottom. Let's make sure his body moves well. And then afterwards, I realized that his front leg will internally rotate a lot. So like he could be on his left foot and spin to his left or spin, I guess, counterclockwise, like almost like an owl all the way around with his foot not moving from the ground. Wow. So like, had I known that, the 30-degree move in his front foot was a complete waste of time because he had another 300 degrees in the tank. So I had to teach him how to create his own stability, which is then what we worked on. But it's like, if I just started with that, I would have never had to, anyway, so that's kind of like a side rant. But I really like your point about the mental side and basically, without saying it, like gaining the player's trust or the athlete's trust or the client's trust. And that's honestly most of the work, the things that I'm trying to get better at and learn more now, because it's more important than ever for at least my job. Whereas like the players understand the technology, they have an understanding of the position, they're playing at a high level. And honestly, even though I was good defensively, like they're playing at a much higher level than I ever had. So like, I'm not just going to show up and like speak the game to them and they're going to be like, oh, learning. It's more about building a relationship, building trust, and helping them, find strategies and ways to like make it through difficult things and be there as a support nature. So that's more of like what I guess those are the rabbit holes I'm heading down now from a personal level.
For sure. Yeah. And this assessment process can only bring a more personalized vibe to your coaching. So they're like, oh, this person is looking at me for what I am doing for my needs. That can only help that relationship that you're trying to build rather than, oh, here's another catching coach trying to throw catching words at me. Like, we've seen 100 of them. They all probably don't work, right? But for someone to actually be like, hey, I'm looking at you.
Yeah. Well, one thing to that point is that quote unquote assessment, like in your space, it's let's, see how each joint moves and see how it works and all that. That's not what I do personally. The Astros, that's the strength, we call them S&C, strength conditioning staff. They do really well at that. What I do is like from a sport standpoint or the skill standpoint is I don't watch them catch 3 balls to their, to their throwing side, we call it, or basically away from their glove. I don't watch them catch 3 balls and be like, oh, he's not good at this. Like, here's my thing to tell them. Versus like, I need to, and even some of the players will come up and be like, hey, what'd you see there? And I'm like, dude, I just met you. Like, I'm not gonna, I can't, like, I need to see you on a good day, see you on a bad day, see you on all the pitches. Is it just this drill? Are you trying something you've never tried before? And then like establish a relationship, learn how they think, how they see it, ask them like how they view what they're doing. So I understand how they think, and then probe and add something in there versus, if I don't tell them something to fix, or if I don't quote unquote coach them, then I'm not doing my job. So those are some of the things that I've personally like really dove into a lot in the last couple months. Yeah. Sorry to cut you off, but
no, that's that's awesome. I mean, I think that speaks like almost the title of this part of the podcast, at least, is just like how to be a really good coach, and just translate everything. This is very baseball specific, but these are just excellent characteristics of someone that I, as a player aspiring to play well in high school, college, or in the pros, would seek out. And then if you're a parent listening to this, these are the kind of coaches that your kid needs to be with. Like the ones that actually care about the person in front of them, not just a player trying to become a baseball player, better baseball player, but like Johnny, I'm looking for him. I'm looking to connect with him, understand what makes him tick. And then not only that part of it, but then like, all right, I'm gonna look at you, the physical side, and what that plays into my process and your service. Because to your story about the kid with the crazy rotating hip, you found a way to excel the progress by first doing the necessary prerequisite steps of just assessing. I think a lot of coaches do that. There's a classic story from one of my travel coaches was like a husband and wife. The husband takes off in a car, goes 80 miles an hour, and then they find out they went in the wrong direction. And the wife wasn't mad at the speeding. She was mad at speeding in the wrong direction. And I think it kind of speaks to that, where you can do this process. You can be really passionate about things, and but if you're going in the wrong direction, you're wasting time. Ultimately, that's just what it is. And so this just allows you to provide a better coaching service, and it allows the person to get more out of that service as well by taking that assessment, taking the time to accurately measure the right process.
Yeah, and one thing to that point, I've never heard that analogy, but I like it. It's okay to go in the wrong direction, because a lot of times you don't know the right direction. Mm-hmm. At least it's a lot less obvious from a skill standpoint. You can't measure someone's rear shoulder ability and be like, oh, let's fix your swing now. Right. It's a little more nuanced, at least still yet. Eventually, hopefully it gets easier. But the point is, like, if you're going to go in the wrong direction, don't head down the wrong direction too long, and don't convince the player that this will fix their career. Mm-hmm. At least early on. So like, try this, see it, okay, like try this. And if they see that you're trying to figure them out, so to speak, it doesn't, like, I was early on worried that if I didn't like have the answer and dart in, it showed them that I didn't know what I was doing. Mm-hmm. Whereas like now it's like, let me like assess them and really like try this, see, and like come to the conclusion and be like, I think this might help. And then test it out, see if it's working or it's not working, and go in a different direction. That person like knows you're working with them and you care about like them, versus saying, like, oh, there it is, here, go. And you're like, oh, wait, that wasn't it. Or like, you don't want every lesson or every training session to be like a new thing to work on, right? Which is counterintuitive, because it's like, you got to keep learning, but you're not going to learn item number 4 if you're like on day 1 of items 1 through 3.
Nope, for sure. Yeah, and to that like little car analogy, they would have probably had a better direction attempt if they would have done their homework initially and they worked together. So it's like the wrong direction isn't necessarily bad if you had a solid why for going in that direction. You had done your assessment, you've worked with the person, you've talked to the person, you're like, this makes sense. Oops, okay. We went the wrong direction. We intermittently assessed to figure out we were going in the wrong direction. We weren't just like, all right, we're going to go this way because the sign says yes. That's bad. That's just not good. It's not professional. And it's not going to help the person long-term, for sure. So that's awesome. That's really good. Woo! Yeah, we can definitely part two this one for sure. We're gonna go. I love this. I can talk baseball forever, especially in this nuanced new world we live in with the training and stuff.
Nuanced.
So I think has been really, really good talking about just principally what makes a good coach, and the principles go right on to skills, learning how to swing, learning how to throw, and then on the physical side, which is the fundamental way people are going to do skills. Right, a rotating hip, a rotating shoulder, a spine that moves well is the only way someone's going to be able to throw, to rotate, and so on and so forth. And that's why the hammering them with try this, try that isn't going to work unless the person can actually do it. So I think that was the big take-home point from those talks. And then understanding the mental aspect too, which is why this stuff is so important.
Yeah, before the mental aspect, I guess like if there's a young player or a parent or someone, or even a coach, if you send someone to some sort of lesson or training session where you're hiring someone to help your son or you or whatever, your daughter, more than you feel like you can, if they're saying less and they're studying how the person moves and they're taking notes and they're interjecting and then they're letting basically the point is like, you want to try this, after getting to know what they feel. So it'll be like, Colin, what do you like? How does that feel? Okay, you tell me. All right, so I'm starting to get an idea of how he's thinking. Is that when you're at your best, how does it feel? Okay. Can you describe to me like what this works? Basically trying to get their cues out of them. And then eventually I'll be like, look at this video. Here's what I see. Try to like way oversimplify it because I have a tendency to throw too much on them. And then say, try this and see how it goes. And then give them like 5 to 8 chances to try it. Mm-hmm. As opposed to like, I've done this a lot, honestly, until more recently than I like to admit, where it's like, do this, takes a swing or two or a throw or two. Like, all right, here's this, and keep pointing out things because I want them to know what I know. But it doesn't matter. Like, they might be like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. And they might even understand it. But if they don't try it themselves, it's not going to work. So you don't want to get a coach who's like, your son takes 15 swings in a lesson and the coach tweaks and tries this. And it's like, that's not how learning goes. You're going there to learn something. And learning is a much more long-term, I guess, ongoing process.
Yeah, 100%. Like in the FRC world, we always say there's no single input in biology that creates a lasting output. No bicep curl, 1 or 2 bicep curls is going to make you a good bicep curler or give you big biceps. All right, so 1 or 2 reps at this new technique or this new way of moving your body, you're not going to get good at it. 2 reps it takes time. You have to give it the appropriate time to be like, okay, this worked, or let's try something else. So that's really good. I love that too, because I've been there. Like, you just get peppered with cues. You're like, I'm going to go play golf. I'm done. Yeah. So that's crazy.
I've done it. I've experienced it as a player where like too much, and then you become reliant on like needing something every time. You don't think for yourself. And then as a coach, I've done it because especially with smarter kids, if I know like the kid or the client, whatever, it like will understand what I say and will conceptualize it and will think about it, then I'll just keep feeding them because I'm like, I'm helping you, but it doesn't work that much.
Yeah, no. I have a similar quick story before we move on to a little coach's corner. Cueing and why it's important, what you said, is to talk to them about what they define as what you're trying to say. And we talk about like single leg deadlifts, or like just imagine for the listeners, a deadlift, now you've got 1 leg, or I'll throw up a single leg deadlift video. And an important part of that is getting the leg you're standing on, that hip, to kind of slide out to create a little balance, a center of mass issue. And I use hip check, I use pop the hip, I use booty pop, side bump, if you're from the 50s, I do the bump. And this one, I just couldn't get this lady to understand it. And she did it and couldn't do it. I was like, I don't know what's going on. And all of a sudden she said, oh, you mean like holding a baby? And she did the motion. I was like, yep, all right, we're going to hold the baby every freaking time. I would have been unsuccessful coaching this exercise effectively and to keep her safe and do it well if I had not had a conversation with her for her to tell me what made sense. That's really important. And that's what Kyle was talking about. Have a conversation with your human, because there's going to be, it's called skinning the cat 1,000 different ways, right? We've heard it 1,000 times. But you have to do that. You have to understand what makes sense to that human to be successful, because the words you say doesn't matter. I don't care. Like, you have to just get the results. It's not about what you say.
Yeah, no, that's hilarious. Have a conversation with your human.
I was dying. When she said, hold the baby, I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever. Yes, that makes sense. I mean, it works. So I was like, yeah, all right. So now with moms, it's a mom thing. Any mom, I'm working with single dads, like, hold the baby. They're like, oh, it's such a good. Yeah, I'm good. Makes me great. That's awesome. But that's a little side note story for that. Let's move into a little the coach's corner to wrap this thing up. So side note to this is that we're going to put on a visual special that's going to be found in the MoveWell TV on my website, where Kyle is going to take a few minutes, 5-10 minutes, whatever his time or allotment. He can throw it an hour if he wants to. And he's going to show you exactly how he assesses, analyzes, and kind of coaches effectively through catching, through baseball, and so forth. So all these words that we kind of talked about, rotating hip and all these things that are necessary for quality movement in quality skill, he's going to actually show you the visual for. So you'll be able to find that on the MoveWell TV, and I'll let you guys know when that's up. So that's going to be a super special thing, and I thank Kyle for that. So to wrap this up, we probably talked about a few of these bullet points already, but things that you used to do that you kind of know better. And we've talked, I think this whole podcast was on what we used to do and then how we want to do better. Well, what's maybe one thing that you're like, oh, wow, thank God I don't do that anymore? As a baseball.
Well, the biggest one is probably over coach or under let the athlete learn. That one, what's scary is that, like, given how rapidly, like, those things, I don't do that anymore because I know better now. Like, considering how rapid that exchange is, I'm sure there's things that I'll look back on in a month from now and be like, oh, why did I say that? But I guess that's the sign of still developing. In terms of, one thing that that's probably the biggest one. But then I guess is I don't know. Based on the email, I'll ask you, because based on the email where I gave you some different answers, which one do you want to head down? Because I can't give you 4 answers. I'm not good at.
That's totally fine. I like the one that is it's. I'll combine 1 and 2, where it's training intuitively, but it's understanding the position a little better. So I'll frame this in what I wish I would have known is like catching, like blocking, and how awkward that position is, and how I never trained it. Never once was I told that we need to, like, get into position, learn how to contract, learn how to strengthen, because you're going to smack yourself down there at high speeds. And if you get a pulled groin, oh well, it's just part of catching, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
It was you need to move in like these positions, position strong.
Yeah, you actually sparked a different thing that's a better answer. From a coaching or a player standpoint, the thing that I wish I'd done better was asking or trying to learn about the things I don't know. My pride or ego, whatever, would get in the way, whereas if I saw someone do something that was different than mine, I would subconsciously viewed it as like a challenge, or basically like a hit to your ego that, you know, what I'm doing is right, or what I'm doing is not right, and that they're better. And rather than seeking that and trying to learn what I don't know, which I do much better now, but I would have figured things out a lot quicker. So that's that's kind of like the overarching theme of what you just said. It's like, well, if I, thought about how could I improve this and saw someone else who was better at it, then maybe I could have just asked. The other one you mentioned, training intuitively. This is just my own personal life, is that as much as I enjoy setting up training programs and like periodizing it and, which days will be hard, which days will be easy, and all the things that a strength coach will do, as much as I enjoy that, you get burnt out eventually, especially if you, like, the sport of life doesn't have an off season. Uh-huh. So you can't like just go year round, like, unless you compete during a specific part of the year or you have like competitions that you peak and recover from, like, there's no reason to stagger what you're doing. So rather than try to fight that and then get bored and resent what I'm not doing, so like if I'm training for a powerlifting thing, like I want to get really strong, then I see someone doing body weight stuff and I get jealous. And I wish I could do that, and I feel deprived, which parallels to like diet or any sort of behavioral change. Whereas I've done a much better job with my training of being like kind of walking into the gym without a plan, which is, I think you can afford to do that when you have an understanding. So like, I'll be like, oh, like legs are feeling good today, I'm feeling explosive, let me do sprint work, and then like an organized lower body lift. So like I'm still following a structure, but I don't like if I feel like crap, I'll be like, all right, let me do some core work or some mobility stuff or some, I don't know, whatever it is, or like that looks fun, let me try it. Doing a better job with that. I think the more I apply that to the rest of my life, I do better.
Yeah, that speaks volumes. Yeah, everything. Like, just be okay with do what makes you happy, along with what your goal is. And it doesn't have to be separate. There was a good post from John Berardi today that I found from one of my precision nutrition friends who shared it, and it was him talking about his little daughter, like 4 years old, and how she just nailed the head on nutrition with this thing where she was shopping with him and she picked out vegetables, a steak, and ice cream, Ben and Jerry's. Came home, was eating it, asked JB to put it there, and he asked why this weird concoction of steak, vegetables, and ice cream, and she was like, steak and vegetables are healthy for me, and ice cream makes me happy. Therefore, together they must be great. I was like, boom, boom, right? That says a 4-year-old, just bang, mic drop, right? So you have a structure, whether you're a powerlifter or a baseball player. But if there's something, listen to your body. This makes you feel good. Like, do it. Like, it's all right. Boom. No.
At least it's different for the athlete that's has a specific goal to get better at. But it's like there's some days it's like, yeah, I'd rather work hypertrophy, or some days I'd rather be strength. Some days I'd rather be like more explosive or I don't know, more central nervous taxing movements. Some days I want to do core stuff. Some days I want to just ride a bike for 2 hours, like, and just go with it. As long as I'm covering all those bases within a week or 10 days, which I do because I know too much to let one go. That works for me. That's more of a general population advice than not.
It works though. It works. Even with those people who are like so specific on their like one day out of 365 that you're training, in this analogy to like just do some fun thing, is probably better to keep your progress than just like killing yourself over it. So that's awesome. Let's move on to something I think we talked about a little bit, like you're intrigued by psychology and wanting to dive down that rabbit hole. So maybe just the why behind that. So this question in the Coach's Corner is just something that you don't know a lot about, but you're actively seeking out to progress your service.
Yeah. Psychology is a broad term. It's more of like positive psychology, or basically like performance psychology, being able to handle adverse events and just kind of move past them, or the ability to build optimism or confidence, or, visualize and put things into place that aren't there. So those are things I've historically have not been good at. So our mental skills coordinator is awesome, and I get to hop on his conversations with the players throughout the week. So I get to learn a ton there, and then just extra reading on that. The overarching picture for me is like, goes back to more intuitive thinking, which I don't naturally do, which is, right now it's that. And at some point it was nutrition, and at some point it was FRC mobility stuff, and at some point it was strength conditioning, some point it was powerlifting, like whatever that biggest thing that you could easily spend 3 hours reading about, regardless of if it's the best thing to learn, like just go learn it, because you'll end up working way harder. The time will go better. You'll feel better about yourself, and you'll learn a lot more than if you did the thing that you think is important that you don't really need to learn. I don't know if I'm making sense, but that's just a big, like 2020 realization for me.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. The thing I think about when I hear that is a Gary Vaynerchuk video podcast, Gary V, the man. And he was talking about people being burnt out. And someone asked about being burned out and how do you prevent burnout? And one of his perspectives on it was, you're not burnt out, you're just looking for something new. So to almost like work with this burnout is probably just like, you're probably overdoing that. So try something else, and therefore the burnout goes away. And that speaks to what you were talking about. It's like, just because you have to be a strength coach and just strength coach this whole stuff, if you're getting burnt out there, maybe you just want to check out a different, it doesn't have to be like, go become a construction worker, like just give up your career. It just means like, try something different, do a different avenue, and try. It's the classic spice things up, right? That's burnout. It's just not allowing yourself to grow and spread out a little bit.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think, anything you learn the first 80% of it, and you got a pretty good handle. You learn enough to realize that, whoa, this thing gets really deep and I don't know what I'm doing. But have kind of a grasp. that first 80% takes a certain amount of work. That next 20% takes the rest of your life.
Yeah.
So like, just because you don't want to learn that for the rest of your life doesn't mean you're, I guess, burnt out, or it's like that's not the wrong thing. It's like, find something else. And then if you end up finding something where it's like, I want to devote my life to this, then great. But don't try to pick that before you did it. I don't know if that.
No, boom. Yeah, it just talks about the process, man. Enjoying the process. Do this, and just don't get stuck in a tunnel. Like, do that. If you don't like, try it. There's nothing wrong with like living this circuitous life. And I think coming from my like perspective too, like parents in, I don't know what my parents' gender or generation is, gender, baby boomers, whatever, a traditional 9 to 5, 40 years, 40 out, stable, blah, blah, blah kind of job mentality, and watching people our age and stuff do these avenues where like, I have no idea what's going on. I had to apply for pandemic unemployment, whatever. And that just like stresses them out because they were like to be comfortable. Dude, screw comfortability. I would rather achieve my passion, actually get this moral feedback that no money can buy, right? Watching people get healthier, improve their lives, and then having to navigate this this lifestyle, way more exciting than being stable. I don't know. That's just me.
Well, you're, it's not a quote, original thought by me just now, but your life is just an accumulation of present moments. And if you're not enjoying those present moments, then your accumulation is not good.
That might be the social media ticker.
Yeah.
Boom. I like that. That's gonna, yeah.
Out of thin air.
Well, Kyle, you give him credit 3 times and then it's yours. That's how plagiarism works. And then to finish up, I think just some, oh boy, this could go advice anywhere. And this whole thing has been advice to coaches and players. But one little 2-minute snack. What advice would you give to players? And then what advice would you give to the parents of coaches too, moving forward with this, maybe seeking out coaching and training? And
yeah, I mean, we could have a 4-hour conversation, not about that question, just about all this. So I like the time on the question, on the answer. I think the message that players need to hear more of, and parents, is that unless you're in your recruiting year of high school, or your scouting year of college, whatever you want to look at it, your development, your long-term development from age 8 or birth to, right before you go to college, if that's, kind of the end goal for most people, that development, player development, is so much more important than any game, any showcase, any video. It's become something worth showcasing before you showcase it. The biggest mistake that players are making right now is that they're over broadcasting and under developing.
Boom. Okay, just kidding. That's gonna be that was awesome, dude. That is like the basis of my. I think the words I was looking for my whole life, my 3 years of this training, is that I found people who I've helped more by telling them to stop playing than I've done anything in the gym. I feel like because of that. They were not focusing on preparing. I always called it be more prepared than doing the thing. But yeah, they just were not putting enough eggs in the preparation, player development basket. And they were all about just play. Coaches need to see you, whatever. And they were hurt. They had chronic shin splints or something, or they weren't doing as good as the coaches, their expectation of the coach's expectation. And they were like really down about it. But they did not, like what you said, I don't know if you can say it again, create something worth broadcasting. Do that first, then broadcast the shit out of it. Like, yes, I like that. I really like that. And think on that, because we're going to go way too far with this. Kyle, man, thank you so much for an excellent podcast. And this will be on the visual as well. But look for, and I will announce it, the actual visual will Kyle gets to show off his actual expertise with baseball and softball, specific coaching, analyses, and he's just going to drop brain bombs on you left and right for however long he wants to. And that will be on the Move Well TV. I'll link that as well. Find this on if you're listening to Apple and Spotify. If you're watching this, Apple and Spotify podcasts. It's also on my website, movewellwithmcgee.teachable.com. Kyle, where can we find you?
My social media is Catching Machine Performance. I just post videos here and there of catchers doing stuff now. Most of my, or all my efforts with the Astros, so I don't all business things on pause. So I don't have anything to sell or promote. No, that's it. Yeah.
No, that's awesome. All right.
Just
No,
ask me for questions. I don't. Yeah. That's all I got.
Even, I mean, and then if you follow him there and he all of a sudden pops up a website or things like that, boom, now you know. But that's where you're going to be able to find him, ask him questions about his process and his thoughts on stuff, because they are highly, highly valuable. I can put my stamp on that for sure. And we're going to be, I see many episodes in the future talking about this. So
I know people always say, yeah, hit me up whenever you want. And then like they never do a second one. Like I don't have anything going on, so we could talk about this often.
I like that. Man, me too. I mean, let's wrap up thousands of episodes. I like it. Well, man, thank you so much. Signing off on this. Again, listen on Spotify and Apple Podcasts if you're watching this. And if you're listening to this right now, you can check out the visual and find the bonus visual on my website. And I will have links to that as well. Kyle, again, thank you so much. Awesome talk. Let's do it again.
Yeah, see you soon.